Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Matthew Dietrich. I am the Assistant Director for Admissions at the Penn State School of International Affairs, and I'm going to have my colleague, Christy Percio, introduce herself.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Christy Percio, and I am the Director of Admissions for the School of International Affairs. We're happy to be here.
And I'm also going to have our current student, first-year student, David Ju, introduce himself as well.
네, 안녕하세요. 지금 펜실베니아 주립대학교에서 School of International Affairs 석사과정에 있는 주세환입니다.
Great. So we're very excited to chat with you all today about writing and building a competitive resume, CV or resume for graduate school applications. And we're very grateful that EducationUSA Korea has invited us to join you in sharing this great information. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about resume. What is a resume? What is a CV? And when do you submit one over the other? Why do you submit a resume or a curriculum vitae, a CV? Best practices in resume and CV writing. So we're really going to go into the nitty gritty about why you or about how to really properly put these documents together for a graduate school application. And then I'm going to pass it over a little bit to our student David, who's going to share his resume and what he did and the steps he took to submit a quality resume for graduate school applications. And then we're just going to discuss some other considerations in resume writing. So first, what is a resume and curriculum vitae or a CV? Well, both of them, they have some similarities. They also have some differences. Really what they're intended to do is provide a summary of your experience and skills to the admissions committee. This is really an opportunity for you to showcase who you are, share a little bit about who you are to the admissions committee from whatever graduate school you are applying to. In both cases, whether you're asked to submit a resume or a curriculum vitae, you need to make sure that it's tailored to the specific program you are applying to. And we're going to go into more detail a little later about how you can research programs and really understand what the graduate program is looking for you to highlight on the resume or the curriculum vitae. And then finally, it should really create a great first impression that you are the best qualified candidate for their program. Whether you need a quality resume for scholarship or admission or both, it's really important that you craft a really good resume or CV so that you are putting your best skills, your experience out in the forefront. A lot of times, the curriculum vitae or the resume is your first impression to a graduate program. And so this is your opportunity for the admissions committee to see your application and maybe read the rest of your application. In some cases, this is a way to vet applicants through the admissions process. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the differences between the resume and the CV. As you can see on the screen here, here's a sample resume. The resume places a lot of focus on your professional experience and skills. You can see here on this resume, the sample resume, that the internships and experience are included on the document itself, as well as the education at the top. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to place, your education and your internships and professional experience on the document in our webinar today. The resume is typically more concise than a CV. A CV really is supposed to tell your entire life story as it relates to whatever you're applying to. So the CV will include publications and research, as well as professional experience in education or academic interests that you have. Whereas the resume is more or less geared towards really just highlighting your experience, and it is really just a smaller snapshot of your life experiences, relevant coursework, education, volunteer and leadership experience. When included in a graduate school application, education should always remain at the top. Of course, you are going to be applying to a graduate school, and so the graduate program, it's really important to them that they see that you do have a bachelor's degree in whatever that may be. It's also important to consider when you are applying to a particular graduate program to make sure that you're tailoring your educational experience towards that towards the graduate program that you are applying to. So ensuring in this case, if this student was applying to a business administration program or an MBA, for example, I can see that they are already qualified for admission into our program. And then of course, reading down through the resume to ensure that that's true. Sometimes you can include relevant coursework, and we'll definitely go into this when we talk about tailoring the resume towards the degree that you're applying to. And of course, understanding what's required of you in the application. So when you're building your resume, you want to ensure sometimes that you are including relevant coursework. And so here on this sample resume, you can see, and of course, this is a fake Chris Morrison, but you can see that on this resume that the relevant coursework is tailored to the graduate program and the background of the student. The resume typically requires more tailoring to the program in which you are applying to, whereas the CV, as I said before, is more of your whole life story. The resume really needs to be crafted in such a way, because it is more concise, typically only takes about 1 page to write, does require a bit more tailoring to the program in which you're applying to. So that is another consideration when deciding whether or not you submit a resume over a CV. And of course, I can't see this part. Okay, a resume will probably be necessary for professional graduate degree programs. The biggest difference that I see between a CV and a resume is that a CV is typically written for more academic programs, or programs where you're going to be conducting a lot of research, such as your traditional Master of Arts programs or Master of Science or PhD programs. In a professional degree, like we have at the Penn State School of International Affairs, we really want to see your professional experience and the types of things you've done while a student in your undergraduate program that qualifies you to gain admission into our program. And so typically resumes are used for professional programs in that way. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about what the curriculum vitae is, and maybe when you might use the curriculum vitae as opposed to the resume. So as you can see here, the curriculum vitae in our example is really telling the story. Now, of course, this is only page 1 of a curriculum vitae. And at this stage of the game, when you are building a curriculum vitae, sometimes you can see 15, 16, 17 pages of information, but it largely depends on how many publications and how many professional experiences you've engaged in, internships, academic positions that you've held, how many degrees you hold. So the curriculum vitae, again, and I'm saying this over and over again, but it really is telling the entire story of your life. The CV, again, places higher emphasis on academic accomplishments, such as research, honors, academic positions held, coursework, publications. It typically is longer than a resume, but it really depends on your academic experience. So if you only hold a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, then you'll only include those. But if you have a bachelor's, master's, and PhD, and maybe a graduate certificate, or you hold 2 master's degrees, of course, you'll include all of that. According to the curriculum vitae, education, you'll include all of your education, as well as any former employment and publications that you may have. Again, with the curriculum vitae, especially when you're applying to graduate programs, you are always going to start with your education. That should be at the forefront at the top. Professional experience and volunteer work, unless it's academic related, is not as important, but still should be included in the curriculum vitae. So it's really important that, again, you tailor it to the graduate program in which you are applying to. However, typically professional experience and volunteer work are going to remain towards the bottom of the document, or in the CV's case, on some of the final pages of the document. And again, you will likely submit a CV to an academic focused program versus a professional graduate program, because the academic focused program, where you're going to be doing a lot of writing and research, maybe you're going to be writing a master's thesis or a dissertation for a PhD program, you're going to need to submit a CV more than likely to show that you do have some research and publications out there to make you the best candidate. So why would you submit a resume or a CV? Why do graduate schools ask you to submit these documents? Well, to put it plainly, it provides a summary of your experience and skills. Sometimes, and not all the time, most graduate schools now are doing the holistic approach, but you may find a graduate program here or there that may use the resume as a way to vet candidates. In other words, if they don't see that you're qualified on the resume, then they may not even go deeper into your application. So it's really important that you're providing a really concise but impactful summary of your experience and skills on the CV and resume at the forefront, so that someone in the admissions committee or a faculty member on the admissions committee can read some of the highlights of your experience and skills and say, this is someone that we might want to look further into. Additionally, this may be the resume or the CV may be a way that admissions committees decide on whether or not you're deserving of a scholarship, or deciding between you and another candidate for a really prestigious scholarship. And so the resume or CV can help kind of separate folks who are applying to graduate programs in that way. Graduate programs, again, use the CV and resume to quickly look over your strengths, interests, and education. So a lot of times when people are looking through the resume and CV, and this is also true for when you're applying to careers post-graduation, the CV and resume is looked at fairly quickly. Most places are not going to take the time to read it word for word. And so they want to look and see the highlights of your skills and your experience. So again, it's really important to make sure you're putting just the most important information on there and that it's easy to skim through. Some programs may use the resume or CV to vet candidates, like I said before, so I won't repeat myself there. Again, and I just want to reiterate this, the resume is likely your first impression on a graduate program. You need to make it compelling enough to read the rest of your application. And so now I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Christy, who is going to discuss building the resume and CV.
Thank you, Matt, and greetings, everyone. Again, I just want to reiterate that we are so happy to be here to be talking about writing a standout grad school resume. And I'm just going to get right into it and share why the resume is important and what you want to include on it. So your grad school resume is an integral piece of your admissions application, because it essentially is telling the admissions committee basically what Matt was saying, these highlights, this quick summary. What we're looking for here is a summary of your strengths, your work experience, your skills, your education, and interests to help us decide whether the prospective applicant is a good fit for our particular program, which is why you should always make it a good and best practice to tailor your resume to that particular program or major. And I am going to get into that here in a little bit. But a graduate school resume is really similar in many ways to a resume that you'd submit as part of a job application. You should use crisp language to describe your experiences and a clean, organized layout to make it easy to read, like our friend, we provided a little example, our friend Lisa Penn. It should be free from typos and grammatical errors, so please proofread. Make sure there is no grammatical errors. So in ways that they are the same, but they're also different as well. Grad school resumes should emphasize your education, work and volunteer experiences, specific skills relevant to the particular program that you're applying to. So we're interested in a student's background and how it's relevant to the program that you'd like to enroll in. For example, David, our guest here today, our guest student, our stellar student, he's a first-year SIA student who's joining us today, was going through this process last year. And with his intentions being an international affairs major. And the admissions committee was very, very impressed to see that his resume was crafted in such a way that aligned with our program. Much like the example on the PowerPoint, David did everything absolutely right. His resume was clean, it was organized. He listed his leadership experience in one section, such as he was president of the Penn State Korean International Club, along with some other leadership roles that he had on campus. He also listed in his work experience that he was a research assistant, which demonstrated to the admissions committee that he had analytical capabilities, which are all very transferable skills for graduate school work and to be in our program. So again, David did a lot of things right, and he's going to be speaking with you here shortly, sharing his tips and techniques with you here soon. So another thing that I kind of want to touch upon is moving along into what the admissions committee prefers to see on a graduate school resume. And there really are 6 main sections that I want to talk about and break down. So the 6 main sections your graduate school resume should include are basically a header. So in the header, you're going to want to include basic information like your name, your current living address, your email address. Some people even include their LinkedIn profile, which is completely and perfectly acceptable. I will say though, as a disclaimer and a note, whatever you put in your admissions application, whatever email you use, you want to make sure that you're using that email on your resume. It's not a good professional practice to have multiple resumes because then the admissions committee will see one on the application for admission, and then they'll see another one on your CV or on your resume, and then we will see another one on the statement of purpose. And it does tend to get a little confusing to us. So I would just recommend whatever email address that you are using on your resume, that you just keep it consistent throughout your application. The next section that you're going to want to list on your resume is your education history, and you're going to want to include your undergraduate degree, your institutions of where you obtained that degree or where you're obtaining that degree, what degree was awarded or your anticipated when that degree will be awarded. And please feel free to include all your educational history. At the School of International Affairs, we have people that sometimes are coming back for another master's degree. We have some people that have got a PhD that are coming back to get a master's degree. So it's okay if you list multiple, your complete educational history and record on your resume. So those are really the first 2 things that you want to start with on your resume. And then the rest can be up to you and your creativity. It doesn't have to be in any particular order. You just want to make sure that it flows well. So you're going to want to list your relevant experiences, such as any current or previous professional roles, internships, leadership experience, study abroad programs that you attended. The admissions committee really likes to see, any type of, international travel, because we find it impressive if one study abroads. That this shows, experiences like growth and maturity, self-knowledge, cultural differences. So, if you have this type of study abroad experience, it's perfectly acceptable to put that under relevant experiences. A lot of people put their work history under relevant experience, or they title it work experiences. So again, it really just depends on if you're coming straight from your undergrad, or if you're coming, or if you're leaving a career and you're coming back to graduate school. It really just depends on your own personal preference of how you want to list this. Then, it's always a good idea to list any research or publications that you participated in. Research projects, any type of articles, publications that you've contributed to if you've worked with a professor throughout your academic or professional career. And we've also seen people list talks and presentations of symposiums that they've went to. This is also tied in with research, and it's nice to see, and it speaks volumes of students that have attended talks and presentations and participated in symposiums. So again, feel free to list any of these, because again, it just shows leadership capabilities, and presentation skills is also important to graduate school admissions committees. The next section that you could list, again, completely up to you on a resume, is skills and certifications, especially those that are applicable to your field of study that you're interested in. So typically professors at universities are usually involved in some type of research, and they look for particular skills in applicants that they would find useful. Similar to how jobs and internships look, to find certain skills from applicants relevant to a certain position. So here you may want to list computer systems that you're proficient in. If you obtain any type of certificates, like a certificate in data analytics, if you know Python or HTML, any type of email capabilities or Microsoft Office software, listing these under skills is completely acceptable and appropriate. And again, professors do like to see if you have these type of capabilities, especially any type of certifications, because sometimes they're looking for students to work under them. So it's always a good practice to list any of these types of skills. And then volunteering or extracurricular activities. This is also another important thing that admissions committees do like to see, because this shows taking on leadership positions in clubs or volunteer organizations. Definitely demonstrates that you're competent at taking on additional responsibilities outside of the classroom. So again, all of these are very transferable skills that align with taking on the rigors of graduate school. So those are definitely the 6 main areas that you want to focus on a resume. And there are some bonus sections that I am gonna touch upon, because it is nice to see students and prospective applicants add these different special touches to their resume. We do like to see foreign language skills. So you can have a language section in your resume if you speak multiple languages. And here, just providing some coaching. If you do list on your resume that you speak multiple languages, you're going to want to include the languages that you've learned and your skill level in each language. So you're going to want to, for an example, you're going to want to list native, fluent, proficient if you're a beginner, if that's relatable to you and your experiences. I will say though, if you do mention that you are fluent in a certain language on your resume, you're going to want to make sure that you're fluent enough to complete an interview in that language. So just be mindful of that. Another bonus section that you can include in your resume is just professional affiliations or memberships. So for example, if you were part of a National Honor Society or the National Society of Professional Engineers, you can also list these professional affiliations under this section, or you can make another section of activities or leadership or whatever again is applicable to you and your scenario. But again, listing these could also be very impressive to the admissions committee. And also, just if you want to add another bonus section to set yourself apart, honors and awards. Let's just say that you were awarded a full fellowship to pursue your undergraduate degree. That would be extremely impressive to an admissions committee. I will say though, each award should only take up a single line. You should list your award and the institution that provided you that award, or the organization that provided you that award, and maybe add the significance of the award by including how many people have received that award. So maybe you were one of 5 to receive the award, or one of 10. So those are just some bonus sections that we think are super impressive that you could also include on a resume. But again, this resume is completely how you want to tailor it. There are many resources online. And again, it's just to give us a picture of you, your personality, and how you would be well aligned with the program that you're applying to. So I hope that this is helpful. Matt, I'm going to turn it back over to him because he has 2 resumes, one that is good, one that is not so good, and he's going to kind of go into particulars on what to look out for in these and how not to put together a not so good resume.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So before I move on, I just wanted to share really quickly, because I think that this resume that is on the screen is actually really well put together. And I'll discuss some more of the intricate details in a little bit. And so will David when he talks about his resume shortly here. But one thing I noticed in this particular resume is that all of the, in each section, everything is ordered chronologically. So for example, this student went to the University of Pennsylvania in May of 2021, for example, but they graduated from the University of Michigan in say 2018. So making sure that you are, when you're crafting your resume, to make sure each section is chronological. One of the most common mistakes that I see is that students will, when they're crafting their resume, will put in things that they've done way long ago first, and do it chronologically from the top down instead of from the bottom up. So that's a really good skill to have when you are putting your resume together. And of course, we'll talk a little bit more about how to really structure it, and as far as literally formatting it, not just each section that you're going to place here in a little bit. So moving on to what is a good resume and what is a bad resume. And I'm excited to share with you these examples. So first of all, and I'm going to move my videos out of the way. The student on the left, we would say is a pretty good resume. It's very well put together for the most part, and it has a lot of information on it. The one on the right, however, is not such a good resume, and there are some reasons in which I will share. But first, let's start with the good resume. The good resume does a really good job of making sure that their education is at the forefront and it's at the top of the page. And then they move into their professional experience and the things that they've done that shows that they're prepared to take on, whether that's a career or a graduate school program, and that they have this professional experience to kind of support what they've learned in their undergraduate or graduate programs. And then, of course, they go into their scholarships and awards that Christy talked about, and some of their skills and professional affiliations. Some things that I really like about this resume, one, is that all of the sections are formatted exactly the same. The education section, for example, has subheaders. That is the University of Pennsylvania, and it has a very short description. And then, of course, the undergraduate university is bolded, just like the University of Pennsylvania is. And then underneath that, it has a short description, as well as the GPA and those types of things. And then when you move on to the second section, professional experience is bolded with an underline, and then it has subheaders. So John Doyle Real Estate Advisors is one of those subsections, and then it has a description underneath it. The second thing that I've noticed about this resume is that the descriptions are short yet impactful. And so they show just a very brief description of each job or each experience that they've had. When you move to scholarships and awards, just as Christy mentioned earlier, each scholarship or award just takes up one line. And so that's really important to note as well. And of course, when you go over your skills and your professional affiliations, you really don't need descriptions for those. And you don't need descriptions for your scholarships and awards unless it warrants a description. Like if it's a very obscure scholarship and award, you can describe it a little bit with a bullet point underneath. Moving to the bad resume, one of the biggest things that jumps out to me as far as why this is a bad resume is because it just does not take up the whole entire page. There are a lot of gaps. The experience is at the top and the education is second. And so when actually formatting the resume, it's really important to make sure that you're using as much of the page as possible. We're taught so much when we're in college or in our undergraduate university that we need to have 1.5-inch margins and we need to type in Times New Roman 12-point font. However, when you're writing the resume, you don't really need margins. In fact, I suggest, and I highly suggest, that you use as much of the page as you can, even if you just have 1 centimeter margins. We just want to make sure that it's consistent throughout the entire page and that you are using it. The other thing that that I don't think is very good about this resume on the right side is that the descriptions are very bland. They don't do a really good job of letting the reader know, if I'm the reader, letting the reader know that they've gained really good skills in each of their positions. And so that's something that we'll talk about as well as far as our tips to writing a really good resume, is making sure that that your descriptions of your skills and your experiences are short and impactful, but not so short that when I read it, I don't really know what you learned and I don't know what kind of skills you gained. And then moving down in the skills area, it doesn't take up a lot of the page, and it's very broad and spaced out on the page. One thing I like about the left-hand side of the resume is that it's very concise and short down towards the bottom of the page. The resume on the right really doesn't highlight the education and how the education is the main focus of their resume. And so when I look at this resume as an admissions committee member, I would say to myself, is this person really serious about graduate school? And the person on the left shows that they're more serious about graduate school than the person on the right. And so I hope sharing this does help to see the difference between a good resume and a bad resume. All right, now we're going to go into tips for writing a competitive resume. So we have 5 key areas that we believe are really important to note when you're writing the resume, and some things that you should think about when you craft the resume before you submit it to a graduate school. So number 1, you really need to make sure that you tailor your resume or CV to the program in which you are applying to. And you'll see this sample graduate school resume of Lee S. Harper during our 5 tips here. So first, research the program. It is so very important that you know what program you are applying to. If you're applying to a Master of Engineering program and your resume has nothing on it that relates to engineering, then you didn't really tailor it to the program. But even more broadly is if you're applying to a more academic or research program, and you tailor your resume more or less like a professional resume where your professional experience is at the forefront, then you really don't know what program you're applying to. So it's really important that you go onto the program's website, you make sure first that you understand their application requirements. Do they require a resume? Do they require a CV? And make sure that you understand their academics and their curriculum and their program, so that when you include your skills and your background on the resume, that it shows that you know the program you're applying to. Make sure, again, you pay close attention to application requirements. So do you need to submit a CV or a resume? Sometimes you need to submit a resume with very specific details on it. So there are some graduate programs that I've applied to personally in my life that really wanted me to put very specific things on my resume, such as relevant coursework or projects or simulations that I was involved in. So it's really, really important to read the admissions requirements before you put your resume together. The third is organize experience, skills, education, relevant coursework, volunteer and leadership roles based on program requirements or area of scholarship. So you want to make sure that if you are applying to a Master of International Politics degree or a Master of Science in Computer Engineering, for example, you want to make sure that your experience and skills are reflecting that you are prepared to take on that type of level of graduate work. So anything that you can think of that you were engaged in your life, you want to make sure that that's at least on the first page of the resume before you submit it to the graduate school. Tip number 2 is to include relevant experience, accomplishments, and skills. So first, you'll want to include all relevant leadership and professional experience in volunteer work. This could include being the president of a student club, internships that you were a part of, or anything like that. And so that'll be important that to include that on your resume. It's really also important to include that on the first page of your resume, especially if you have enough experience to include a second or a third page of your resume. It's important that you put these types of things, your relevant experience and the most powerful relevant experience, on the very first page. Next, you want to make sure that you do list out accomplishments such as high academic achievement, including being on the dean's list or scholarships that you've earned. Christy talked a little bit about this earlier, or even professional awards. So maybe you won Employee of the Year at your job recently, or you won another professional award, such as a high award that only your role would earn. That's important to include as well. And so you want to make sure that you put those on the resume. Now, awards and distinctions don't necessarily need to be on the first page. They can be on the kind of towards the bottom of your resume on the second or third page, or if you just have a one-page resume, towards the bottom is okay as well. I would say the other things like leadership and volunteer experience, professional experience should probably be closer to the top. But again, read the application requirements first. Also, you want to include relevant skills, and that would include, for example, data analytics or Microsoft Office or something like that. Number 3 is to be thorough but concise. And I know that these can be kind of contradictory. So you want to make sure that you are going, including all of the information that is relevant, but make sure that it's not too much information. So you want short, impactful statements on your resume. Keep all descriptions on 1 to 2 lines. Here's a pro tip: short, impactful sentences are the way to go. Each descriptor for your experience should have an action word at the beginning. So for example, as you can see on this resume, under Office of the President, Student Worker, this person attended and contributed to meetings related to university improvement, for example. Not everything needs a description, such as volunteer work, scholarships, awards, etc. And you can see that here on this resume. Tip number 4 is to keep it professional. This is a really, really important aspect of writing the resume. So make sure you format the resume with proper titles, headers, subheaders, etc., and be consistent. So as you can see on this sample resume, all of the headers are the same, all of the subheaders are the same. They're formatted the exact same way with the same font, size, spacing, etc. So that's a really important aspect when you're crafting your resume. Keep the margins consistent and use up as much of the page as possible. Again, the font type and size and word spacing should be consistent and easy to read. Proofread multiple times. In fact, even take your, and I think that's the next thing, is take your resume to a trusted person in your circle. So your professors, employers, or supervisors to look over your resume for feedback. And that's a really important tip that I'll share with you. Of course, my arrows are coming in a little late here. And number 5, and I think that this is something very important, but often overlooked. It's a very simple thing, but submit your resume as a PDF. When you submitting resumes as a PDF is standard and shows you're serious about the program. If you submit it as a Word document, sometimes the formatting can get thrown off and it just doesn't look clean and professional. And so we really suggest that you submit it as a PDF. After converting it to a PDF, just make sure that it's still formatted nicely. Sometimes when you convert from Word to PDF, it throws off the formatting a little bit. And of course, save the PDF with an easy to read title, such as resume _ last name, comma first name, and that'll be another important feature that you have when you submit it. Don't submit it with a funny name or something not very professional. You just want to make sure that you're the most outstanding candidate for the program. And with that, I'm going to send it over to our student, David, first-year student at the School of International Affairs, who's going to go over his resume and talk a little bit about how he crafted it and put it together.
안녕하세요, 여러분. 반갑습니다. 우선 오늘 제가 여러분에게 크게 두 부분에 대해서 말씀드리겠습니다. 제가 생각하기에 레주메를 작성할 적에 아주 유용한 팁, 그리고 두 번째 파트는 이제 제가 쌓은 경험들에 대해서 여러분에게 좀 이렇게 얘기를 나눠드리겠습니다. 우선 제가 생각하기에는 레주메를 작성할 적에는 액션 월드가 중요한데, 예를 들어서 뭐 led, 뭐 동아리를 이끌었다, 아니면은 뭐 assist, 뭐 무엇인가를 보조했다, 뭐 이런 액션 월드들이 중요합니다. 그리고 액션 월드들이 중요한데 레주메를 쓸 때는 I라는 단어는 안 쓰시는 게 좋습니다. 왜냐하면은 액션 월드를 먼저 이렇게 쓰는 게 규칙이기 때문입니다. 그리고 또 유학생으로서 또 레주메를 작성하는 데 있어서 아무래도 영어가 모국어가 아니니까 이제 문법이나 또 스펠링 에러가 있을 수 있는데, 그런 것은 간단한 에러는 그래머리라는 앱으로 이제 실수를 잡을 수가 있습니다. 그리고 또 크게는 또 원어민에게 가서 이제 교정을 받는 게 좋을 것 같습니다. 그리고 동아리나 또 아니면은 발렌티어 익스피리언스 이런 거를 하는 게 좋습니다. 동아리를 그냥 회원으로 참여하는 것보다 이제 리더십 포지션을 이제 열정을 가지고 지원해보고 또 할 수 있도록 노력해보는 것도 좋고, 또 발렌티어 익스피리언스는 여기저기서 이렇게 찾아가면서 이렇게 열정을 가지고 하면은 그게 이제 지역 사회나 이런 데 기여했다는 점이 되기 때문에 그것도 여러분들께 도움이 될 것으로 봅니다. 그래서 제가 이제 제 레주메를 에 대해서 말씀드리자면은 일단 저는 펜실베니아 주립대학교에서 코리안 인터내셔널 클럽이라는 곳에서 회장을 했습니다. 회장을 하면서 어떤 거를 했는지 밑에 제가 설명으로 적어놨습니다. 예를 들면은 새로운 회원들에게 이 대학에 처음 왔거나 아니면은 이 지역 사회에 처음 온 분들에게 이제 이곳에 대해서 알려주는 그런 인포메이션 세션을 열었다. 뭐 이런 정보를 이제 구체적으로 적어주는 게 좋습니다. 그리고 또 지역 사회에 봉사한 예로는 제가 교회에서 이제 그 아이들 이제 주일학교 이제 보조 선생님을 했습니다. 그래서 Assist with Weekly Children's Ministry at the Local Church라고 이렇게 작성을 해놓았습니다. 그리고 또 여러 가지 발렌티어 익스피리언스가 있는데 한 가지 예를 들자면은 이제 펜실베니아 주립대학교에서 새로운 학생들을 이제 오리엔테이션에 웰컴하는데 이제 그 체크인 프로세스를 도와주는 발렌티어를 했습니다. 그리고 또 일을 한 경험도 이제 여러분들께서 그 레주메에 작성해 주시면 좋습니다. 그래서 캠프에서 저는 캠프 카운셀러로 일을 한 경험이 있습니다. 그리고 마지막으로 이제 여러분들께서 받으신 상이나 그리고 또 뭐 아니면은 레코니션들을 이렇게 작성해 주시는 게 좋습니다. 예를 들면 저는 이제 펜실베니아 주립대학교를 다니면서 이제 학기 중에 GPA가 3.5가 넘으면은 학교에서 딘즈 리스트에 학생을 올려줍니다. 그런 것도 하나하나 다 적어주시면 좋습니다. 네, 감사합니다.
You're finished, David?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Wonderful. So I hope you all learned a little something, one about David and two about how he wrote his resume. So thank you so much, David, for sharing your experience. And so just wrapping up a little bit here, some other considerations that you may take when you first apply to a graduate program and you want to learn a little bit more about their application requirements is first set up a meeting with an admissions counselor to discuss the application requirements. During this meeting, maybe you can ask a little bit about do they have a specific way to write the resume or cover letter? Do they prefer a resume or cover letter? And what types of things can I include on the resume or cover letter in order to make me the best candidate and so that I can stand out? Another tip that I'll say is online templates are not always your friend. And so Google searching resume templates is probably not the best way to go. I really highly encourage you to just start from scratch with a Word document. Sometimes these templates can look too flashy, and you'll want to make sure that yours just looks organic and clean, and it looks nice. And then the final thing that I'll say is start over every time you apply to each graduate school. Admissions committees can really tell if you're just submitting the same resume over and over and over again to every single program. And so it's really important to make sure that you are tailoring the resume and the CV to the program in which you are applying to.